and suddenly, somehow, we're back on time. We were off time for like 3 hours, and suddenly we're on time, and I don't understand why. All right, so this is our final panel for the day, and we're calling it cultural appropriation, and a discussion on how to be a good ally. And I wanted to give some context to why this is happening today. Um, we as Americans, I think we appropriate everybody's culture. We take the pieces of what we like most from this and that and this and that. I mean, that's the beauty of America, right? And it's also a part of America that erases people and takes identity from people. And I think that identity theft is sometimes done on purpose to control populations, as has been done in the past and is being done all over the world still today, not a thing of the past. And then done accidentally also. Absorbing unique, beautiful cultures because their numbers are small, and you take one little piece of it that you like, and it just further erases the people from whom those sometimes very sacred and spiritual items or ceremony. Sometimes that's all they have left, and when it's absorbed by somebody else, I've reflected on this really hard. My mom and I were actually talking about it the other day. At what point everything we do really is cultural appropriation with, Taco Bell and yoga and all the things that we talked about before. But I think the biggest part for me is that when you have a culture that was purposely almost exterminated on purpose, and the language was taken away, culture and religion especially was taken away, their lands were taken away, and then you're appropriating one little tiny thing they have left, it just makes it so much harder for me to bear. And I'm careful to not do that to anybody else's culture. I don't want to be that guy, I don't want to do that. And sometimes we do it mindlessly, and sometimes we do it on purpose. And I know we're all looking to belong, and we're looking to be full again inside. And as we move and are moved and lose pieces of our ancient cultures and our traditional places, we're always looking to fill that void, and it's easy sometimes to take from somebody else's culture that piece is somewhat more intact than maybe what you're experiencing yourself, and you take that to fill yourself. And so there's a lot of ways, that can be so ugly and harmful and erasing people today. Yet if done with some protocol, and after meeting these girls here, they gave me vocabulary, because I feel weird and I do a lot of hand gestures, I'm not sure, but this and this, and oh, I don't like that. But there's some vocabulary to talk about this conversation. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. And so I just wanted to express why I think it's so important that this conversation happens today. Part of it is extremely personal, because we are from one of those tribes that was almost completely extinguished here in like literally right here where we're sitting. And there's a lot of pan-Indianism and cultural appropriation that happens in our community by well-meaning people, and I don't want to blame people and shake the finger, but at the same time, if we can get from this point that we're at over here and the middle, there's some good conversation that can happen, and understanding of why, kind sir, you're doing that, and it's really hurting me, and it's actually harming my people and my culture, because we are in, like I was saying earlier, we are in a critical state of destruction. They say that we were extinct. I've read that in many book. We're not extinct, but 148 people is not a whole lot of people left. So I think it's the right and perfect time to have this conversation. I think people are ready to listen. And, I'm not trying to, when we have these conversations, sometimes I feel yucky. I feel like I'm taking away somebody's birthday, or, I really do, or that I'm I'm in some way the one who's trying to cause a fight or point fingers, and it really honestly is not that. This is a conversation that is long overdue to happen, and we need support, but we need real support. And it can go so awry so fast where suddenly it's almost like objectification of, mean to, and you're trying to help, but what does real help actually look like? And what kind of support mechanisms can we put in place? And speaking here locally for our tribe, or if we go down over the hill for that tribe, I would assume that we have real similar issues throughout California and throughout the nation with our Native American people. And not just of our Native American people, but any culture that is not, the dominant culture at any given moment in time. So we met down at the Bear River because we were coming together to bring the Nisenan perspective on what if a dam was built down there on the Bear River. And so we were having really great conversation about why we object to that, why another cultural landscape being inundated, more burial grounds being inundated is not okay. We have already many burning grounds and burial grounds under all these other fake lakes already, like Wildwood, Inglebright, Bullards Bar, Rollins, all have Nisenan cultural landscape under that water. So we were having a conversation about, no dam. And along with that, I invited Xylem and Selena. And we had I felt like it was a little workshop, kind of like a little round table without the table. And we had a heart-to-heart forum discussion with some folks down at the river. And we started talking about some of those pieces that just feel weird. It feels weird to appropriate somebody else's something, And it was really successful. I thought we have to keep doing this. And so since then, I'm going to let you introduce everybody. I'm going to jump off the stage because I want to hear this conversation. And I've talked so much today, I'm sick of my own voice. But I want to acknowledge the work that is being done. There are a lot of women out there doing a lot of this work and holding space. And it's just really, really beautiful. And so I welcome you guys today. Thank you so much for coming and participating. And I'm just going to hand it off to Xylem and let her take us where we need to go.
Thank you, Shelly. Thanks, Brian. Thanks, Shelly. It's a real honor, and I feel humbled to be here in this seat today. Really grateful for the Nisenan tribe for welcoming us all and sharing your culture with us today. It brings tears to my eyes to realize that you know what it's like to be indigenous to this very place right here. And when we talk about indigenous cultures in this conversation, it might also include the larger sense of indigenous to the lands in general, and there's a diversity of cultures and opinions that we'll be talking about. So I just wanted to give that disclaimer. And I'm going to introduce myself briefly and pass the mic for each woman to introduce herself, and then we'll pass the mic again to give something we want to add to the framework of this conversation about cultural appropriation and how is it different than cultural appreciation. And then we'd love to open it to a few questions at the end, and if there are any indigenous people in the audience that would like to hop in on answering and jump up at any time, we welcome you, especially from the Nisenan families. So my name is Xylem Larladay, and I'm originally from New Jersey. I'm not native, I'm Italian and Irish. And I've been living in this county for 13 years, and I'm 37 years old, and when I was 22 as a young woman, I was a tree sitter, and I was invited out to Lakota land, to Lakota Sundance, and trained by the American Indian Movement warriors at that time, and schooled by a lot of amazing uncles and aunties who I need to give My respects to, as I've been taught to share, that the Crow Dog family, and in particular Grandma Casey Camp from the Ponca tribe in Oklahoma, taught me a lot of what I will share. And then I went to Standing Rock. I'm an herbalist and a medic, and when I served there for 2 weeks, and they asked me, what is the tribe where you are from, and what is your relationship to them where you are, and sent me home to meet you. And I'm very grateful for that introduction and to be learning your stories at this time. And my work in the world is as a teacher. I teach teenagers, and I'm a mentor in communication. So these conversations I like to look at as learning opportunities, even if feelings get heated, to welcome those feelings into the room and know that it's okay however we feel. And I like that it's at the end of the day, so if anybody wants to talk afterwards about your feelings and situations, we can talk after too. So I'll pass the mic for other introductions.
Hi everybody, my name is Daniela Fernandez. I am a queer Latina from the trailer parks of Florida, and I made my way to California about 10 years ago. I'm excited to be here. I feel really honored to be in this seat. The talk that Shelley spoke of down by the Bear River that Xylem and Selena facilitated, I was there in the audience, and I thought it was a great talk. Since then, Xylem and I have had another public discussion on cultural appropriation. So thank you for inviting me again today. And yeah, I look forward to hearing what everyone has to say.
Hello, good afternoon. My name is Selena Manson. I lived in this community for 5 years. I'm originally from Santa Barbara, California. My family is, 3 of my grandparents are from Mexico. One of my grandparents is English, and their tribes are Buribecha and Wirarica. And when I was in college, I was blessed to have an Apache professor who taught through the Religious Studies Department decolonizing methodologies, which really took me away from anthropology, which had been my framework that I had been using, into a new praxis of understanding how to see the study of culture through indigenous eyes, and how important it is to give that power back for people to be able to tell their own stories. I was fortunate and blessed to be able to go to Standing Rock and Ochotishikoi and helped out with digital smoke signals and indigenous media work there, and was able to learn a whole lot about the type of networking that we have to do and conversations that we need to have in order to be able to go against, billion-dollar corporations and start to work on our collective interests as we have as human beings. So I'm honored to be here, and pass the mic.
Hello, my name is Nikila Badua. Aloha nui loa miigwech. I come from the Ahupua'a on the island of Oahu, and my maternal side, Red Lake Ojibwe, from North Dakota and Minnesota, Canada. And my introduction into understanding more about cultural appropriation, I think I was just raised seeing a lot of things happening around me coming from the islands. But I really started to open my eyes a lot more about it when I got involved in the nonprofit world and saw a lot of things that didn't feel good to me. And it set me on a journey of just becoming a little bit more literate and learning how do I talk about this stuff, especially with non-native peoples, or people from different demographics. And I actually was a singer for many years, and I ended up always having to play at a lot of different festivals. And I had a lot of reflections during those times, and I actually left that industry because there was just too much that didn't feel good to me, and I didn't know how to address it at that time, and that's how I ended up getting involved in nonprofit work. And now I'm back here. I've lived in Nevada City off and on for the past, since the 90s. I have family from here. My mom used to live here, and I really love this land, and I'm thankful to be here, support the Nisenan. Ashe.
Thanks, I feel humbled to be with these ladies. um, I know one of the basic questions that people have is what is cultural appropriation? And I want to give the briefest of frameworks and then pass the mic to Selena to give a historical context. That when people are asking what is cultural appropriation versus cultural appreciation, I appreciate this culture, so I want to wear things from it, and oh well, there are things here being sold at the booths, and if I want to buy and support people, is it cultural appropriation if I then wear it out? And there's differences, and Selena can offer some insight into how we don't understand that there's differences between sacred items and ceremonial items and things that are for everyday wear and use and that are approved to be shared with people. And so it's different if something is a craft versus something is a sacred item. And it's also different if someone is gifted with a teaching or a ceremony that is taught freely to them and shared with them for their personal enrichment and activities, and then they turn around and go and advertise themselves as a teacher and charge $1,000 to learn how to be an indigenous healer, which we see fairly often. And that's also different than if someone teaches you practices for your own personal use and then you're doing them at home quietly while you pray with yourself at home in the ways that you've been taught by your teachers and honoring those teachings in that way. And so there's nuances and there's a diversity of opinions and experiences and teachings around that. And if you ask any person in this room and from different tribal cultures and other cultures that are sharing things, there's going to be a lot of different opinions, but those are some of the things to come into the conversation with and to understand how is it that we have come as a non-Native person. I think it's important to have this voice on this panel, although I feel humble about it, because we're striving to learn and sometimes we've been separated from our culture. Catholicism took over both of the traditional teachings of where I'm from, and so there's this longing to connect with authenticity, and that's real, and I think that's seen. And also when we're longing to connect with authenticity, we need to be really careful about not grasping and grabbing at things that are not our own and taking them without permission and using them and promoting ourselves as teachers of those things or crafters of those things. So there's sensitivity and there's nuances. And Selena has a really beautiful historical context, so I'd like to pass the mic for her.
Thank you. I've probably had about 1,000 conversations that were not successful to talk about cultural appropriation. And through that, because I didn't feel good about what I was surrounded by and all of that, it took a lot of soul searching to first heal what it was that it was bringing up in me. And that's still something that I am an ongoing process working towards. As a student of decolonization and anthropology, decolonization is a process of self-research. It's looking into the real history of things. We have to understand that we were not given a history that is accurate, that it is written by the victors and it always has been. So we have to fulfill the gaps, and we have to start looking at some of these things like the doctrine of discovery, which is, Papa Bull from 1493, that was the Pope declared all lands with no Christian king were considered tierra nullius, meaning that they were empty. And the fact is that we can see that that's not the case. They were not empty. There was enrichment, there was good feeling, there was good energy, there was thriving, there was people living all around the world. So this colonization process has affected everyone around the world, and when we look in our bubble, it can seem very personal, but this is happening all around the world. And different cultures have a different way of looking at it. So I started to look at how this land here was settled and what happened to the people here. So, you know, you have the expeditions that came out in the early 1800s and started to settle the land. The Department of War, actually, what changed to be the Department of Interior, created the Bureau of Indian Affairs, which was then the managing agency, or you can call the prison guards of the concentration camps and prisoners of war that are here that we know to be glamorized as reservations. So how was anthropology, how was ethnography created within that landscape? There was something that was developed, considered a new science, the new science of culture, the taxonomy of culture, creating, documenting now all these cultures that were being murdered around the world. And thank God that they didn't extinguish them. But there are many people still living in their realities today, and we give thanks for that. So as I was looking through this, the Bureau of Ethnography, I'm going to read something to you, was established in 1879 by the Act of Congress for the purpose of transferring archives, records, and materials relating to the Indians of North America from the Department of War, which they call the Department of Interior, to the Smithsonian Institution. So the creation of museums was the first was the first anthropology that there was, which means that when people were murdered, their bones, their skeletons, their remains, their implements, what they were wearing, was then taken to the museum. And that is the first that we see of cultural, we can't say it's cultural appropriation, but what is that? That's basically saying, okay, well, as we integrate these people into the lifestyle that we want them to have, give them new clothes, take their children to boarding schools, and start to educate these savages in the way that we see fit, we're going to document what they used to have. And they had to work with the Department of War. I mean, they literally they were forced to cooperate. And, it's an ugly history if you think about the people that were unfortunately lost, their lives in that settlement. But then ethnography developed further once there was settlement and there was reservations and agencies at all the different at the different reservations around the country. So this is what created ethnography. And this happened worldwide. And we look at things like anthropology and wanting to study, and now culture became a catalog, and you can turn the page and everything about these people, and the taxonomy is there, and we can look at them. So my question is, how has this cataloging of culture now somehow entered into the spiritual marketplace, entered into urban outfitters, entered into all of these things where, I know what I want a little bit of this and I want a little bit of that. And it becomes a really difficult conversation to have because you don't necessarily want to offend anybody if they are making a choice at their own liberty through entitlement. And so how can we start to understand it from this perspective of what does it feel like for somebody who's growing up as a survivor of the greatest Holocaust that has still not been acknowledged by this, this government? Conservative estimates are 19 million people were lost at that time. Conservative estimates. And say that they have to get over it and they have to go along with, in my past life I remember I was this spiritual person and now I can just do. These are some of the things that people say to justify what they do. It's not for me to tell you if that's right or wrong. It's really not. Who am I to judge? But these are the things that feel uncomfortable to me. And people should not have to, from surviving cultures, have to come out like police and say, don't do that, don't do that. That's not even part of their spiritual values, to come and be the critics. So how can we start to be the people that get it, is my question.
To add on to the historical context, one of the things that my elders in the American Indian movement were active in the 70s was that up until the late 70s, it was still illegal to practice any Native American ceremonies in the United States. It was illegal to have their ceremonial drums and instruments and to wear their regalia. And so the people I call aunties and uncles who adopted me, they were the people who took over Wounded Knee in 1973 and had a 71-day stand where they took a stand for their right to do their ceremonies. And as a result of that movement and gaining publicity and support, at that time, the American Indian Religious Freedom Act was passed in 1978. That was just 2 years before I was born. It became legal to do any ceremonies. And so in this context, when Selena's saying, oh, Native people are being told to get over it, just get over the genocide, it didn't just happen many years ago and that was, oh, you know, we're gonna grieve that loss. It continued to be illegal to practice their culture and to be themselves until the late 70s, and so it's still very precious and very raw. There are still elders from that boarding school generation who are very tenderly approaching and rising within their own culture and reinstating their voice and having the courage and the backing, and I feel like we are in another tide of supporting Indigenous voices to rise and to acknowledge and receive recognition from the people. And it's still we need to understand in this time it's still very tender because that intergenerational trauma is still very real. I know there was a panel earlier about that, and maybe some of you heard that for some people it's intergenerational, and for some people it's still very present, that they were as children told that they could not speak their language or wear their ceremonial things. And so to see it for sale at Urban Outfitters, something that was so precious and only survived at great peril and by great effort and courage, it's really a tender thing to approach that conversation and to understand that those feelings are very big, that hurt is very deep. And yes, it's not, you know, as a non-Native person, if I'm wearing my feather headdress, which I would not do, but if I'm wearing some ceremonial feather headdress mock-up at a festival, for instance, which still does happen quite a bit, and someone approaches that person, I would love if everyone in this room could back that person up and help that person understand why, and don't just let it be somebody else's problem or like roll your eyes and look at your neighbor, but actually be brave to go and talk to them and to bring what they don't necessarily understand, because it's not taught in American schools. We don't receive that history. We don't understand how much pain there is associated with people being taught that they cannot practice their own culture, and now suddenly we're supposed to be cool wearing those same items. It's really a lot of feelings, and my intention is to offer up some information and for us all to listen to some more. I'll pass the mic now, to have fuel for those conversations, to look at them as learning opportunities, that we're not coming in being the cultural appropriation police, but saying, hey, there's some things you might not understand about that. Yeah.
However, I heard tell of a group at Burning Man called the Cultural Appropriation Police. Yeah. And I've heard that if they see someone wearing a headdress or something that they deem culturally appropriative, that they will circle the person, this crew, this gang, if you will encircle the person with caution tape. So they'll create a caution barrier and then attempt to engage in dialogue with this person about why what they're wearing or doing might be culturally appropriative. So I think that's funny. Anyone ever seen that at Burning Man? No? Oh. May you see it in the future, if you wish. Yeah, I've heard a couple people up here say, and Shelley says, I don't want to point people out. I don't want to make people mad. I'm okay with making people mad, and perhaps that's my white skin privilege to be able to say I maybe have less to lose to be able to do that. Okay, so I think I wanted to kind of say what you said maybe in a different way because I was thinking about it a lot. Thinking about aspects of culture that have been sort of shamed or somehow stigmatized within a culture, and how it's really important to look at the dynamics of cultural appropriation. So we're going to use the example of a headdress, right? And how these things can be really hurtful to cultures because not only have, and I'm not sure if the headdress is an appropriate example, but I'm going to cross cultures and I'm going to talk about cornrows for Black folks. Okay, this is something that has been stigmatized in Black communities. Thugs, gangsters, bad people, criminals, hip rappers, they wear their hair in cornrows. And then here you have well-meaning white folks like Madonna or Miley Cyrus or Jessica on the corner over there, wearing cornrows in their hair. And the reason this is so painful is because white folks can often easily get away with something that Black folks in other cultures have been shamed for. And I think this is really, really important. I think it's important to consider that aspect. Also, are you making money off of it? I think the money piece is a big, it's a big consideration. I mean, I often see in a lot of white circuit, I'm going to say white a lot. I haven't realized, nobody said white yet, but I think a big part of naming white people culturally appropriating other cultures is that they are the dominant culture. So there is a power dynamic that is set up already that allows them to benefit in ways that people of color cannot. Okay? So when white folks, I lost my train of thought, got so wrapped up in white folks. Gosh, we get too wrapped up in white folks, don't we? I see oftentimes a lot of white makers, right? We're talking about people who work with their hands, who make things like dream catchers or rain sticks or tomahawks, right? And they can put them up on Etsy and sell them for $100, $200. And then I see indigenous folks in the Southwest and all over the United States selling pieces from their culture for a fraction of the price just to get by. This is cultural appropriation. This is problematic. It is problematic when white people sell other people's culture for monetary profit. This is white supremacy, this is colonization, and it is cultural appropriation.
So I want to take a spin and I want to empower you all. For those of you who find the beauty of Native art and who find the beauty of Native jewelry or any of those type of aesthetics. And I want to challenge you to take that beauty and to not just be in love with the romanticized aspect of a culture, but to understand that, people say, oh, I have this feeling, this calling. Well, I don't know if you know, but there are over 567 federally recognized tribes, there's more than that are dealing with serious issues of protecting the earth. Standing Rock was a great opportunity for people to reach out and actually be involved with cultures that need help. They are on the front lines of standing up for all of our collective rights for water and for a lot of other issues that have to do with this planet. They are surviving on very bare margins that are now even being cut. American Indian Health is at risk of being cut in ways that we cannot see right now, just the way all of our healthcare is going to be impacted. Every year when it becomes winter, I am thinking about people that live in substandardized housing in places like Pine Ridge who don't have the money to buy the propane that they need. We have third world conditions happening in a neighborhood near you. If you want to wear something native and feel like you're doing an awesome job, reach out and actually do something for these communities. There is nothing that I have to say about what anybody is wearing. What I want to empower you to do is to find out how you can help people. These people are needing help. The reason you're feeling called is because they're calling upon you to do something. That's why you feel called. You feel called to get involved with what's going on. They need help. They need help in these reservations. They need help in these communities to protect their own rights that the treaties have never been honored. You know, and there's a lot that's going on with that. So there's so much that you can find now because of things like Standing Rock. There's Line 3 that's going on now. There's the Makwa Initiative. You can find them on Facebook, MAKWA, Makwa Initiative. There are people now that are being arrested to protect us from the implications of the Enbridge pipeline. There's divest movements that are happening worldwide right now. $2 billion have been divested from Enbridge in the past 2 weeks. Stay in the know and communicate with these communities because they are calling upon our help. They truly are, and that's why you're feeling called. It's not just to buy the pretty painting.
I just lost my train of thought. I guess I want to just tap into some resources. I was called in to be part of the writing of a guide for festival culture. It was a very interesting process. The project is called Forward Alliance, and it was birthed out of just the situations, people coming to festivals dressed in headdresses, and so a group of indigenous peoples from the U.S. and Canada came together to formulate this, as well as non-natives, to formulate this guide. And now this guide, some of those people are working hand in hand with the Ohlone and forming another guide. And I will share like one of the first principles that is being talked about is just a general awareness that wherever you are, pretty much wherever you are on the planet at this point, but especially in our country, in the Americas, you're on occupied territory, and it's really an individual journey to make that choice to educate yourselves. And that's, working with youth, that was a big part of, I'm an artist of different modalities, but really like the foundation of wanting to share art and wanting to work with youth in the arts is really about taking that educational reform into our own hands, because our educational institutions don't have this set up yet, unless you're homeschooling or you have you're privileged to have a very progressive alternative type schooling. This education is not there yet. We live in a country that is mostly multicultural at this point, and there's a lack of racial literacy in our educational institutions. So it's right now where we're at, it's up to us to take it in our own hands and be responsible for ourselves. There's a lot of different resources. You can learn more, from the Ohlone, what they're writing about and meeting about right now too, regarding cultural appropriation and living on Ohlone land, and as well as my uncle. He is Dakota Richard Trudell, cousin of John Trudell. He was one of the first 25 Native lawyers in this country, and he luckily took me under his wing for a while and taught me a lot about indigenous politics. And one of the things he was working on when he started doing this was the UNDRIP. It's the United Nations Declaration on Indigenous Peoples. And this is a resource you can read up on. It's basically, it's a declaration that was started, I think, in 1985 to be adopted by the UN. I don't think it was actually adopted until, it took 20 years, over 20 years to write this declaration, because there's so many agreements and different perspectives to formulate a guide like this. And basically, when it was finally adopted into the UN, there were 4 countries that didn't approve of it, and that was the US, Canada, New Zealand, and Australia. And the reason why is because it makes you have to look at the atrocities that have been done to that were being done to the people, the indigenous peoples of their countries, and they weren't ready to address that yet. But I did just learn recently that eventually they did adopt it, and I think it's up to us as individuals to adopt it ourselves and to learn more about what that declaration is. You can go online, just look it up, UNDRIP, UNDRIP, and you can read it, you can download it, and learn more about it. One of the main things that's relevant is Article 31, which is about intellectual property rights, which is what we're talking about with cultural appropriation. And maybe I'll just leave it there. Oh, I do want to share too, another thing that's been coming up for me is around cultural appropriation. In my life experience, is, I come from islands that have been deeply exploited. And I actually just made a post on Facebook. I didn't realize it would get a lot of activity, but I think it's an important topic, is that a lot of us in this county especially, we're very privileged to be able to travel. We're very privileged to be able to go to beautiful places and choose to live there part-time. And being from Hawaii, like my family, we had to come to the mainland when I was younger, and I because we couldn't afford to live there, there's not much work, and my island in particular is very exploited by the military. It's one of the largest military industrial complexes in the world. The Hawaiian Islands is also one of the biggest GMO testing grounds in the world. And it's also Hawaii, the post that I made is about Hawaii is the #1 highest homelessness per capita state in the country. And the reason why is because what I realized with cultural appropriation, just cultural perspectives in general, is that we live based on different perspectives, that the way that we're raised, and this is where I feel like education is a huge key, and why it's so important for us to take on that responsibility, is that the way that I was raised and the way that I see the world is very different from, say, a typical non-native from a completely different non-native culture. We have different perspectives and way of life. We have a different connection to the land. We have protocols, things like this, that the only way we're gonna really understand and come together and respect each other is if we take the time to learn things ourselves. But when I was bringing up, in Hawaii, one of the things is that people wanna come there, they wanna live, but they don't understand the impacts of how it affects the local culture. And this is a form of oppression. We may be very well-intentioned, want to go spend time in Hawaii. Oh, now I want to buy property here. But understand what you're getting yourself into. Understand what the local issues are. Integrate with the local communities if you are going to make those choices. It's oppressive to just stay within your own cliques and not learn about the local culture and how you might be impacting. And no matter where you go, I think it's just a certain common sense, really, to me. So yeah, I'll leave it there.
Just to add on to that, in addition, I think, to learning about local culture, I think part of the antidote is to learn about our own cultures and our own lineages and where we come from and where our people come from. Sometimes we don't have access to that, and sometimes we do. So to those of you that are already doing that or already are on that journey, awesome, great. And I encourage everybody else to continue looking that way, looking towards your own lineage, your own rituals, your own culture.
And just quickly, we were speaking with the matriarch of the Nisenan earlier to ask her what some of her perspectives are. And she shared with us that when we look to the dancers and we see them now, we see a lot of different things that are happening with their regalia. There's a lot of stories that happen with different families that marry. Maybe someone's from the coastal band and they want their wife to wear a certain thing, and things get traded and changed along the way. But in all reality, we don't need anything to be in nature and to honor the source. So we don't need any of these things, putting on these necklaces, putting on these fabrics, patterns, whatever it is that look really cool and stylish. We don't need that. It's just a distraction. It's a distraction from our search to actually figure out that spirituality really is about taking all that off, and figuring out that we are all united under the sun here, and why would we continue to battle with this material reality to continue to divide and alienate?
I want to thank everyone for your attention today, and we won't have time for questions because it's time to close out the day. But we do have time. I'll hang out outside for a while, and I don't know. What's that? We have 3 minutes? Okay. Does anyone have a burning question before we wrap up? Do you want to come up? Yeah, and so I want to just encourage people as we close out the day to continue talking, continue asking, continue this conversation. And with permission from Shelly, I also want to offer I do see some friends that are landowners and crafters in the audience, or people that do ceremonies, that traditional protocol would be to ask permission to do those things before you start. And now we're in this awkward stage where, oh, well, we're already doing things, so it's a little late for asking permission, but Shelly would welcome introductions and inclusion and invitations are very welcome. So if you are a crafter, or ceremony leader, or landowner, that those introductions and invitations are very welcome.
Can you say what you mean by introductions and invitations, just in case?
Meeting introductions would be to introduce yourself before you leave. Have you actually spoken to tribal members? Take an opportunity here. They're showing themselves to you to say hello, and to give invitations to certain places and ceremonies, or asking permission would be done traditionally with offerings that you might bring gifts, and to do so respectfully and include where you come from and who your teachers are and what you're doing and where you learned that from, so that there's a whole picture involved.
Hi, my name is Pilar, and thank you so much for sharing everything. I live in the community. I have been here for 2 years, and I am a cultural appropriation police. I am. And I'm doing a lot of racial justice work here in the community, and I appreciate everything that you've been saying. I am not from here. I am from Mexico. I'm an indigenous woman with Aztec background. And what I just wanted to share about, kind of adding to what all of them they shared, is about what I see also happening with my culture. And a lot of the things that you said, Selena, and I forgot her name. Nicola, about people coming, white people coming to my country and also taking parts of our culture to their benefit. And it's something that I see happening here in town a lot, like you see all these cacao ceremonies and all these things. And it's just about bringing awareness to that, because these things keep happening because people keep supporting this. So if you are aware of the background and what's happening, I just met Javier here, he's from Oaxaca, and every time that I meet people from my country, we talk about these things, and we are upset, we are angry to see these things. I get so angry whenever I see cacao ceremonies with yoga and tantra, all these things. It's BS. And it would be really nice for people to become aware of all these things. And especially something that I see a lot happening is in the spiritual conscious community. And that's kind of the community or the demographics that I'm calling out. Because it's really hard to have this conversation with them, because I feel they're conscious and spiritual, and spirit is telling me to do these things. And it's BS, because that's not what happens. You pay for a retreat, you pay a lot of money to travel, and yes, you pay for doing that, and then you come here and then you want to take advantage of that. So it would be good that people in the community become aware of that too.
And a final note I want to say as you introduce yourselves and invite is to be conscious as you're asking people from indigenous cultures to come and speak at your events, that is a favor they're doing to you, for you, and to ask what you can do to give back and how you can support their elders and their families and offer your support. And sometimes that might be a new question, so it might take some time, but keep asking and offering your support. Thank you.
Also, folks, if you're looking to have more conversations about race in the community, please look up racial literacy in Nevada County. I'm an organizing founding member, and we host conversations about race in the community. We'll be picking up the ball after the holidays again, so keep a lookout. Thank you.